Hello and welcome to yet another Blender tutorial. Some people asked how I made that little signature logo animation you just saw. And in this video I will show you step by step how it's done. Hope you like it, let's go! Okay, here I am in Blender 2.8. And the first thing, I delete everything. For this tutorial I'm not going to redo my logo, my signature, because that would be boring. I'm gonna do something new. Little smiley face, and one wouldn't need a reference image for that, but I drew one anyway with a black marker on some paper because I wanted to show you the workflow that I used to create my signature. Okay, so I go into top view with the 7 on the numpad, and then I take my reference image and simply drag it into Blender, and that puts it in here as an image empty. Okay, so now when we look at it from top view, we can start placing a curve. Okay, right. First, add a curve. Shift A, add curve, Bezier. It's kind of hard to see where this curve is. So let me change some things on the viewport settings here. Image empty transparency, turn that down quite a bit. We just have to be able to tell the shape that we want to create, and this is our curve. So I'm gonna just delete one of those vertices, so my curve is just one vertex now, and I will move that to the starting point up here. Maybe rotate it a little and scale it down. Now by hitting E on the keyboard I can extrude. And I can already tell that we're going the wrong way. So this is going to be our first point. And that's going to be the second one. We'll place this one here, maybe rotate it up like this. Scale it in a little. And then this is our second point. And I can just keep hitting E to extrude, and then R to rotate, G to move and place. Or, with this last one selected, I can simply hold down Control on the keyboard and left click with the mouse and place new control points. Okay, now this is way too many control points for a simple circle. So let me just undo this and place some points like this. Scale up, move this one down here. So we just have to recreate our shape, and then a control point down here. Scale out this handle like so. Okay, extrude for a control point over here. Maybe place it more down here. Rotate. Okay, extrude. Rotate. One thing that I'm trying to do here is to have those arrows that show the direction of the curve have sort of a constant distance between each other. So you don't have any pinching going on. You know, just place your control points so you don't have vertices super close together or further apart. Basically, by simply keeping the distance between the control points at sort of an equal distance, and also by scaling out the handles, you can make sure that you have kind of an even distribution here. Okay, so that's the first curve. You might know, here this doesn't look right here. Let's fix some things. Yep, that looks good. Okay, now you know that you can go to the curve settings, geometry, and then use the bevel depth to give it a round shape. So this is sort of a tube now. And the other thing we want to do is we can go into edit mode, and by hitting Alt S, you can actually scale the radius of a single control point. We could also go to N and then use the radius over here. Same thing. So I want to shape this, this line to look more organic. So we start probably with a relatively thick line and then fatten this up here a little, maybe be thinner on the left. Then again, thicker on the bottom here and over here. Maybe really thick over here just to show the effect. Then we're thinner here again, and then maybe a little bit thicker at the end, like this. So all I'm doing is selecting a control point, hitting Alt S, and then move the mouse. That's all you have to do. Now we have this shape, and with this parameter here, we can draw on the shape from 0 to 1, which we could use in an animation. But there's a few things we have to still do to make this look nice. First off, I don't like the fact that these tubes are open at the end. Now there's one solution to fix this, and it's built into Blender, right into the curve settings here. You can still see here the fill caps checkbox, but that doesn't do anything at the moment because it only works when we have a bevel object. So let's create a circle and use that as a bevel object. Add curve, curve circle. Go into edit mode, scale it down quite a bit. And then go to this curve here and select the circle as the bevel object. Now we can go back to the circle into edit mode and scale this down so that it looks the same as before. You can already see that the curve now is using this circle for its bevel shape. It's still a circle. And now using this option actually works, and I can select fill caps. And what that does is it closes up the ends here. So now this is filled. If I hide my empty, you can see that we have a face at the end here. But this is still not what I want, and I don't think it looks very nice. What I want is to have sort of a rounded off end here and then also here. And there is really no way to do this with the curve options that we have here. Oh, one thing that I notice here is you can see that the curve itself has those edges. And that's just a resolution that Blender uses to render out this Bezier curve. So we can turn the resolution up to something like, oops, like 32, and then we get nice round shapes. Okay, so although the curve options here in Blender give us a lot of control, it's still not quite exactly what I want to achieve. But all of this work was not for nothing. We're gonna use this curve and do something else with it. Now the trick to get those round end caps is to do this whole thing completely differently. And what we actually need for this is a cylinder. That's quite a big cylinder. So let me scale this down to about the size of the circle that we had here. Then also I'm going to go to face select mode, delete the end faces here, this one and that one. And from top view with the cylinder in edit mode, I select all of the vertices, or actually from front view, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees so that it's laying flat and facing the x-axis like this. Now from top view, I'm gonna scale it on the X down to have sort of a segment like this. And this is going to be one segment of our tube that's going around here. Now to make a tube out of it, all I need is an array modifier. I can crank up the count here. Go back to solid view. Oh, by the way, maybe a little trick in case you don't know. You can switch between wireframe, solid view, and the shading modes up here. But there's also a pie menu for this, which you can open by hitting C on the keyboard. And then you have the 4 options for the viewport shading. Wireframe or solid is usually what you use when you switch between while you're editing or sculpting or modeling something. And you can select one by clicking on it, or if you're really fast, you can simply hit C and then move the mouse to the left for wireframe or to the right for solid view. So C move to the right gives me solid view. C move to the left, wireframe. I don't have to click anything. Okay. So now here we have this one little cylinder segment and we have an array modifier on it that gives us this line. And all we need now is a curve modifier, and we will use our Bezier curve that we created. And now if I hide the curve and all that's visible now is the cylinder, you can see now that with the array modifier on the cylinder and the count, I can replicate my little cylinder segment object this many times, like 630 times, to get the same shape that we had before. But this is now, first of all, it's a mesh because it's an actual mesh cylinder shape. And secondly, we can now animate this count for our animation, for our writing or drawing animation. Now the cool thing about this array modifier is these 2 options here, start cap and end cap. And that's where we can put in an object that will be placed here at the start and here at the end. Now, first of all, I'm going to select my cylinder and hit W shade smooth so that we get smooth shading. And now let's create our start and end caps. Right here in the middle of the scene, I hit Shift A and add a UV sphere, which is of course very big. In front view, rotate 90 degrees, scale it down quite a bit. Okay, maybe go to local view by hitting the slash on the numpad. Then go to wireframe and box select this half and delete those vertices. So now I have this dome shape, which I will also shade smooth right away. Okay, now zooming out in top view, I can now go to this cylinder object that has the array modifier on it, and I can select the sphere as a start cap or maybe as an end cap. Yeah, okay. So now what that does is it places my object at the end of the array. And it does that even if I turn down the count of the array. You can see that it places that object always at the end of the array. Now I can go to my dome object, go into edit view, select all of the vertices and scale them down. And you can see that the end of the array is here, and it places that end cap object right where the end of the array is where the origin point of the object will be. You can see here the origin point of my dome object is moved off a little to the left here. So I can simply move my vertices in edit mode and move it closer until it sort of touches there. Okay. Now there's one cool option here on the array modifier, which is merge. And by switching this on, what we get now is it merges the vertices onto our object and makes it look really nice and smooth. Let me go back into edit mode here. And you can see now if I scale my dome object that I can make it fit this end here and make it look nice and round. If I move it on the x-axis, I can rip it off, or at some point when I get closer, it attaches it. And you can even set this distance, this merge distance, in the array modifier right here. Okay, now we have an end. We need a start too. So let me take this object, duplicate it, hit escape to keep it in its original location. Go into edit mode, select all of the vertices and rotate them 180 degrees and move them on the X. Now let's go back here and put that sphere 001, that copy, onto the start cap. And going back into edit mode and moving that stuff in X direction. Now there's a bug still in Blender that you have to remove and reattach the start cap. On the end cap, for some reason, we can go in and edit stuff and you can see the effect on the fly. You can see it scale and attach. But for some reason on the start cap, that doesn't do anything. So we have to sort of eyeball this and remove it and reattach it. And then we have this start cap. One thing that we notice here also is that, let me go to wireframe quick. Blender nicely scales up the dome that it puts here at the end and attaches all the vertices nicely, but it doesn't scale the dome object in the X direction here. And that means that, for example, over here where we have a larger radius on our control point of the curve, we don't get as much of a radius going this way. And the only way we can fix this is by going into our object, our end cap object, and scaling it on the X and deforming it sort of this way. And then we have to go back. Sadly, this doesn't update in real time. So this wasn't enough. Let me go back into edit mode, scale it some more on the X and reattach it. And now we get more of a round shape here, which looks nice. Okay, now let me remove these spheres because we don't need them anymore. And I will animate this quickly. I go to my first frame on the animation and I set the count to 1. You can't set it to 0. 1 is the lowest value you can set, so you always have something showing up, and we'll fix that in a second. Then I hover over this input and hit I on the keyboard to insert a keyframe. Now how long would we actually need in real life to draw this circle? Let's say 1 second. We have 24 frames per second. I'm just going to set this to 25. Set the end to 100. And on the 25th frame, so exactly 1 second later, go to my array modifier. And 1 second later, I want the circle to be finished like this. Where is my empty? So how far is this line? Okay, like this far. And then I hit I while hovering over the count here again. And now we have an animation for 25 frames of this line drawing. And we have nice start and end caps. We even have the cap here while it's animating. That's the power of the array modifier. So let's quickly see what that looks like in rendered view. Make it dark background, add a point light over here, make it a little bit orangey, add a point light over here, but below, make that blue. So when we look at it from the front, we have nicer colors. Move that up a little. Okay, what does that look like? Like this. Okay, so that's our shape. And we have animation. But you can tell here that on the first frame, we always have this object here. And that becomes even more obvious when we do the other lines in our drawing. So let's do that quickly. Right, so we need an eyeball, add another mesh, curve Bezier, go into edit mode, place or remove this vertex, place this one at the beginning here, scale it down, extrude it. Now this one is facing the wrong direction. Segment switch direction. Okay. Now it's going this way because that would be the way I draw it. So scale. We just want to go down the middle here. Control left click, control left click, control left click, and now let's clean all of this up. Rotate, G to move, R to rotate, S to scale. Okay. So now that we can see what we're doing, just like before, I'm going to go to geometry and set a bevel depth, and then go into edit mode and hit Alt S and scale up the individual control points, the radius of the control points. Maybe something like this. Make it really fat over here. Take this one out a little further, like so. Scale this one in. Scale this in also. Now this one down here has to be really thick. You can play around with this, you get the point. But again, we're not going to use Bezier curve. I'm just going to call these Bezier curve. This is the face. This is the eye one or left. I'm going to hide them or hide this object, and instead I will take my cylinder, which is now being used for the face. I duplicate it, hit escape, let's call this cylinder face, and this one is a cylinder eye left. Of course I need to use the other curve now, the eye left curve, which is this one. Over here I will simply right click and delete all the keyframes and set the length of my array to be like this. And we can actually reuse our start and end caps for this one too. Okay, so first we draw the face for 25 frames, then maybe we wait for 5 frames, and we start with a count of 1 by adding a keyframe. And how long do we need to draw this little circle? If this was 1 second, this might be 25 frames, I don't know, like 7 frames, little circle. So at 37 frames, I'm going to increase the count here to something like this, 87 segments, and hit I on the keyboard again. Okay, so first we draw the face, then a little bit of pause, and then we draw the eyeball. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing for this the closed eyeball over here and for the mouth. And I'm going to speed up the video because it's always the same method. All right, I did the other eye and the mouth. So first we have 25 frames of that big circle for the face. Then we have this eyeball, and then the mouth. And that's basically our animation. Let's say we make it 70 frames long. Okay, next thing, just like before, we can select this one, but not the cylinder. I want the Bezier curve. And for the curve settings here, we can increase the resolution to maybe 12 is okay here. I don't know, because it's such a small object. Then also for this eye, also maybe increase the resolution a little. And for the mouth, I have already set it to 24, the resolution for the curve. Okay, we're almost done. There's just one thing that we notice here. When I go to the beginning, we can always see all of the objects because the array modifier, the lowest value here is 1. So we always get at least one segment, and then of course the start and the end cap. Now if you want to animate this, we actually have to animate the visibility, and we can do that over here. So for the face, I don't think there's a problem because we start with frame 1, and the first frame that we render is going to be this one, which is okay. But when we're done with that, we want to start with the eyeball here on frame 30. So I go to frame 29, or actually I go to frame 30, and hovering over this camera icon here, I hit I on the keyboard to insert the keyframe. Then I go one frame to the left, so on 29, I hide this object from rendering, and then hit I again. So it will be invisible all this time until frame 30, where this becomes visible. Okay, so now we draw this eyeball, and then somewhere around here we start drawing cylinder eye right. Where is that? Right here. Okay, so here it should be visible. Hit I on the keyboard. One frame to the left. Don't render it. Hit I. So it will be invisible up until this point. And on frame 40, this will become visible. Oops. Now, last thing, the mouth. It starts animating on frame 50. So I hit I over here. Go one frame to the left. Hide the mouth from rendering. And hit I again. Here in the viewport, we still have the objects visible, which is okay. And I've actually tried animating the visibility, the viewport visibility, but that doesn't really work. But that doesn't matter because all we really care about is the rendering. So let me see, where is the image empty? Let me hide that. And I pick this frame. First I have to add a camera. Move it up on the Z-axis. Maybe split my view here. Look through the camera by hitting 0 on the numpad. Move up the camera some more. Maybe move it over so that we have our face on the side here. Okay, now over here I'm going to switch off overlays and go into rendered view, and this is what it looks like. I will also save this file quick. And now when I hit F12, you can see that although we can see those little bits here, in rendered view, we don't see them. If I go to the first frame, all we're really going to see is that first bit of the face. Of course, if you wanted to, you could also animate this. So let's go to the cylinder face. On frame number 1, we hit I where we want to see it, and then we go back to frame 0, hide the face, hit I, and then we start our animation. It's frame 0. So we have a completely black frame 0, like this. And then on frame 1, we get the first part, and then that's gonna draw out. And at the end, frame 70, we have our smiley face. One other thing that I can see right here is we can see those segments. Now we can go back to our face curve, maybe even increase the resolution to 64 to make this smoother. But one other thing, since we're using cylinders for those segments, for creating that tube, the result here, with the caps at the beginning, at the end, this is just a mesh. And if we wanted to smooth out any of these imperfections, we could always go and slap a subdivision surface modifier on this. And now you can see it's super smooth. Of course, we have to do this for all of the cylinders. Subdivision surface and another subdivision surface. Okay. Now all that's really left to do is render this out. And what I did for my signature logo was I took a pen and some paper and I recorded the sound that it makes when I write my signature. And then I put all of this together in video post-production software. So you get the feeling with the sound that this is actually being written. But of course, the whole thing is a 3D object that you can also, fly around with your camera and do all sorts of crazy things. One last thing I want to mention, in the curve settings, we also have an option down here in active spline where you can set the interpolation for the radius. So remember, we can set the radius by hitting Alt S and changing the size, the radius for this control point. And there's interpolation going on between the radius of this control point and the radius of this control point. So if I set this really tiny, you can see the linear interpolation that we have at the moment, from fat to really tiny. And then from this tiny one to this fatter one over here again. But we can also change how Blender interpolates the radius with this setting. So we can set it to ease, which makes it smoother, or you could set it to cardinal, which gives this effect, or B-spline. So you can really smooth out the transition of the radius of the control points.
Alrighty, that is it, guys. That's how I made my little signature logo animation that I've been using in all of my latest videos. Please hit the like button if you learned something new today. And also, if you try this out yourself, please post a link to your creation
in the comments. Thank you for watching, have a wonderful day, see you soon, bye!